Well, after a 10-day sailing trip, mostly 10 days, and then when I came back, it was my birthday, went stand-up paddleboarding. I have gear just about everywhere. I was good when I got back about dealing with all my sailing gear. Everything is cleaned and hung up and put away and washed and all that stuff. The nice thing about it not being my boat, it was just really clothing in my sleeping bag. But I've got gear all over the place, and a big part of what I do as a paddling instructor is I'm always dealing with gear. You can sort of see the mess in front of me. It's part of the job, is just dealing with tons of gear. And even when it's not students' gear, like right now we're still dealing with COVID, so I'm not teaching, I try to keep my skills sharp. And so I'm still paddling, and I went stand-up paddleboarding, things like that. And I'm like anyone else, gear piles up because you deal with what you immediately have to, but then you end up with a van that looks like this. I'm going to deal with all this gear, but I wanted to talk a little bit about making big trips happen. Question that I get a lot is what big trips do I have planned? And I get this because I have a history of doing big trips. In 2011, I kayaked the Inside Passage from Ketchikan, Alaska to Skagway, Alaska, about 350 miles of Alaskan coast. And 2 years later, I was back in Alaska with two friends kayaking amongst glaciers in Prince William Sound. So when you have a history of doing big trips like this, people always want to know, hey, what are you doing next? What's next on the list? And it's said with this sort of anticipation that's super flattering, but is also a lot of pressure. And so I generally have a trip that I'm working on that I can talk to people about. But what's interesting is that when I turn that around on them, I generally get hems and haws. The thing is that I've come to learn that it's super easy to come up with reasons not to do a big trip. And I call it the I don't haves. I don't have the time, or I don't have the money, or I don't have the permission. That's a very popular one. Or I don't have the skills, or I don't have the gear. Those are biggies. And I talk about this a lot in my book, Go, a whole chapter on sort of working through those problems. I want to tell you about two people that were in similar situations. So this guy I know named Andrew decided that he wanted to ride his motorcycle from North Carolina to Alaska to go to a beard and mustache contest. He was big in the beard and mustache world. He decided he wanted to do that on a motorcycle, despite the fact that he didn't own a motorcycle, have the money to buy a motorcycle, or let's be honest, really know how to ride a motorcycle. I gotta switch bays. Despite all of those problems, not having a motorcycle, not knowing how to ride a motorcycle, he ended up riding something like 14,000 miles from North Carolina to Alaska and up to the Arctic Ocean in the Northwest Territories. Another person that I know, a woman named Molly, decided she wanted to have an outdoor lifestyle. She had worked in an office, I think, her whole life, although she had a history as a runner, like a marathon runner, and she decided she wanted to be doing stuff in the outdoors. And so I met her first in a class, I think a map and compass class. Then I had her in a wilderness survival class. Then I had her in a backcountry cooking class. And somewhere in there, she decided that she wanted to climb Kilimanjaro. Here's a photo of her on the summit of Mount Kilimanjaro. Okay, let's continue this, but I've got to keep dealing with gear. How did these two people work through the I don't haves? And what happened was they realized that it was really easy. All you had to do was decide you were going to go do it. I know that sounds overly simplistic, but it's really that easy. The don't haves really are just a con that we play on ourselves. The don't haves are a resource problem, and resource problems can always be fixed. The easiest is time, right? I don't have the time to do this. I don't have the time to make a big trip happen. Time is super simple. Think about all the time that you waste doing things, be it watching a movie or playing a video game or whatever. You know, if you reallocate an hour a day to plan a trip, you know, you work for an hour after dinner every night. At the end of a week, that's 7 hours. You can quickly do things. And I did a lot of planning for my Inside Passage trip in the evenings and on weekends. Time is really not that hard. Another big one is money. I don't have the money to do a big trip. I saved for the kayak that I needed to do the Inside Passage and the dry suit that I needed to buy by skipping my $3 cup of coffee every day for close to a year. It adds up, you know, little things like that. Andrew sold a big portion of his record collection, you know, and he valued that record collection, but that record collection gave him the ability to do something else that he valued. Permission is another big one. I don't have permission from my job. I don't have permission from my partner. Most of the time when people say that their job would never let them do that, they haven't asked their job if they could do that. And you can frame it in a way that is good for your boss, for your employer, right? How would you like to save 3 months of salary while I take a leave of absence to do this trip? I helped someone prep for an AT thru hike who was starting in February because it was the only time that their employer could let them take the time off, as opposed to starting in March or April when most people start. Was it ideal? No, but she hiked the AT. If it's your partner, you've got to frame it to them as, hey, this is important to me and this is something I want to do. So let's figure out what we can do to help to make this happen so that it doesn't impact you too badly. Communication is key. And I admit that I'm super lucky that I have a partner who understands that the big trips that I do are a part of what make me me, and that's important. Skills and gear are the easiest. Skills you can work to develop while you're prepping your trip, and gear you can acquire slowly over time. I thought about doing the Inside Passage for 10 years before I actually did it. And then at one point I said, it's now or never. I've got to do this. And about 18 months later, I was paddling the Inside Passage. I worked really hard for those 18 months. At one point, 10 people said they wanted to go with me and went through the beginning stages of prepping and preparing and training. But 6 weeks before my trip, I was going alone. Everyone had bailed out. They had all succumbed to the I don't have con inside their brain. But then I made a call to Sarah, who is a paddler with a similar background to mine, who has worked through her own I don't haves and was a great companion. 6 weeks before the trip, I asked her. It took her about a week to get everything hammered out. She met me in Ketchikan and we paddled to Skagway. I planned the trip to take 30 days. Sarah had to do it in 23 because she had to get back to work. We did it in 21, and we even got 3 big rest days in there. If you dream of doing a big trip, hiking the AT, climbing a mountain, driving around the world, whatever it may be, you can do it. You just have to put aside the don't haves. You have to make doing the trip a priority. Okay, with that said, I've got to finish cleaning the office and get back to work. See you outside.